This is part 2 of our video on right triangle practice. So we're looking today at just solving using all the different methods that we've learned for either sides or angles in a right triangle. So our next example, we have a right triangle. I can tell because of the square in the corner. We have an angle of 14 degrees, a side of 180 millimeters, and we want to find that missing side x. So when I'm trying to figure out what method to use, Pythagorean theorem is something that we only use when we just have sides. So you would need to have two sides that you know and then try to be finding the third side. Sine, cos, and tan ratios we usually use when we know an angle or are trying to find an angle. So I notice in this question they gave me an angle of 14 degrees, which to me is a sign that we're going to use either sine, cos, or tan. So from here, what I would do is I would label my three sides. I know if I'm using sine, cos, and tan, I want to label my sides hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. So the hypotenuse is always the side across from the right angle, which would be over here. It's the longest side in your triangle. The one across from the angle is the opposite. And then the third of the three sides is adjacent. Adjacent means beside. It's the one beside the angle. So what I like to do then is look at the three sides and see if there's one that I don't really know anything about. And that would be the hypotenuse. It doesn't really have anything labeled on this side, so we are going to ignore that for right now. So I have the opposite and the adjacent. So to help me out, I like to use the word SOHCAHTOA. This reminds me which sides go with which ratio. So I know that we have opposite and adjacent. So I'm looking for something with an O and an A. So my opposite and adjacent would be here. That's tan. So we're going to use tan. So tan of angle A equals O opposite over A adjacent. So for angle A, I'm going to put in the angle in the question, 14 degrees. So tan of 14 equals opposite, that would be x, divided by adjacent, which is 180. Now this is where we have to really stop and think about what we want to do next. So depending on where x is in the question is going to determine what our next step is. If x is with the tan, then we would probably do an inverse tan. But the x is not, it's over here in the fraction. And I would like to get x by itself. So in order to make that happen, I am going to try to get rid of that divide by 180 by cross multiplying. So there is a secret 1 underneath that tan of 14, and we are going to multiply across the equal sign here. So I'm going to do 180 times tan of 14 and then 1 times x. So anytime we're solving for a side, you want to cross multiply. So I'm going to calculate this on my calculator. We've talked about this before. If you see what you type in on your screen, so if you press tan and the word tan shows up on your calculator, you just type it in as you see it. You do 180 times tan 14 equals. But on my calculator, I can't do that. So I would have to do 180 times, and then I don't do tan of 14, I have to do 14 tan. So I'm going to do 14 tan and then equals. And I get 44.87. I want to round to 2 decimal places. I see that that's a 7. I look at the next number, it's a 9, so that's going to push that up to 88. So it's 44.88 millimeters is our approximate value of x. Okay, we're going to take a look at the next example in the next video.